Me, a goth? It's more likely than you think, particularly in Pop Screen's Halloween month, because this is that time of year when we like to look at the good, the bad, and the spooky of movies either starring by or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host. My name is Graham Williamson. I write for The Geek Show, of course, and Byline Times. I'm also a video artist and filmmaker, and I've been joined this week by...
It's me, it's Andrew, making a return appearance to the show after probably quite a long while, actually.
It's a while, isn't it? Was Dick Tracy the last one?
I think Dick Tracy was the last one we did.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that is going back some. But where can people find you, Andrew?
That's it. You can find me online pretty much only these days at the Behold podcast, where we cover comics, TV shows and movies based on comic books, of which Graham has been a fairly regular guest.
Yes, I tend to drop in every time you're doing something that's either incredibly pretentious or incredibly terrible, which in practice covers at least a third of your output.
Oh, it really does.
Yes.
Actually, I'm getting worried because I feel like we might be running out of absolutely atrocious dreck that we can get you on for.
Oh, I don't think that well will ever run dry.
No, actually saying that, we still have not done a Man-Thing episode.
We did do a Man-Thing episode. I was on the Man-Thing episode.
Oh my god, we did do a Man-Thing episode. I can't remember what episodes I've even done. Jesus Christ.
But yes, we are not recording this episode in the dingy, wet gloom of October. We're recording it in the dingy, wet gloom of July, because we have both recently been to the cinema to see Ty West's MaXXXine, have we not?
We have indeed, and we're also both approaching that age where if we try and talk about it in a few months' time... Well, I mean, I forgot that I did a Man-Thing episode. I don't know if I'd remember that I'd ever seen MaXXXine.
Yes, but this is the third in Ty West's slasher trilogy, which began with X, which we did do a Pop Screen episode on a couple of years back because that had Kid Cudi in it. He remains on board as a producer. We didn't do an episode on its prequel, Pearl, which is superb but has no pop stars at all in it.
Yeah, we really need David Cohen's Sweet to drop a sick rap album or something.
Yes.
Possibly while dressed as Superman.
That would bring
just do it from the set.
It would bring all the Snyderverse guys on board, I'm sure. They seem open to persuasion.
Yep, if there's one thing I know about the Snyderverse guys, it's that they're willing to give things a chance.
So I think there's room for a quick description of what your thoughts are on this franchise in general. Right, Andrew?
Yes, indeed. So I actually didn't watch X until last year. In fact, last Halloween, appropriately enough. And then I watched it, finished it, and said, well, I must now immediately watch Pearl because I bloody loved it.
Yeah.
And Pearl also absolutely fantastic. I think it's very interesting how different those films are.
Yes.
X it's very much like a traditional 70s sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, very heavily influenced, very low budget 70s slasher. And then Pearl suddenly becomes this, it's like 50s melodrama, golden age of Hollywood musical. Yes. Which also features Mia Goth going insane and hacking people to death with an axe.
It's very strange. It's a very organic kind of franchise in the way that doesn't really happen now. Nowadays, if somebody wants a franchise, they buy the rights to a series of like 7 novels or an infinite number of comic books or something. Whereas Pearl basically just happened because Ty West and Mia Goth were stuck in quarantine for it was the COVID times, and just started kicking around ideas for Pearl's backstory, and then they made a film out of it.
Yeah, and also just the fact that they set that film during the Spanish flu outbreak as a way to get around the COVID stuff. It's such a genius thing.
That is very good. Yes, yeah, yeah. I quite liked X. I'm not. My tastes in horror don't really run to slasher movies usually, but I can appreciate that it was doing a lot right and it had a lot of interesting things in it. I think I'm going to lay my cards on the table. Hang on. Here's my cards. They're going on the table,
Wow,
which
you've
is
done it through the magic of audio. It's like the audience are with us in the room.
I think the 2 sequels, one of the reasons why they are interesting, the 2 follow-up films both deepen and complicate that story significantly, and I really like that.
Oh yeah, I think X is definitely like the most simple of the 3 because it's basically just it's a really well done slasher that has kind of more of an awareness of the tropes that you see compared to other things. But it's definitely the sequel more into the like the Hollywood aspect of it, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and also just the complexities of the characters' relationship. You can see in X that the characters of Maxine and Pearl are being paralleled, even if you don't recognise that it's Mia Goth in both roles, as indeed many people didn't, because the makeup is that good. But I think by the time you get to Maxine, there's a lot of Pearl still hanging around in Maxine.
Indeed, I mean, quite literally in one of the scenes.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is interesting about this particular sort of installment in the trilogy is that it's the only one that has a kind of it's the only one where, to use an appropriately comic booky line of reference, which makes the case that we actually do live in a society, because X has a certain sense of the 70s, but it is stuck in a barn in the middle of nowhere. Pearl, as you say, has all of that golden age Hollywood referencing, but it is also in a barn in the middle of nowhere. And this is set in Los Angeles, and suddenly that's very different.
Yes, I mean, Los Angeles, specifically Hollywood itself.
And Los Angeles in the 1980s, so there's a lot of room for the kind of explicit period details and media references, posters, things on television that the previous films had not really used at all.
Yeah, well, a big part of Maxine is that it makes explicit references to the Night Stalker.
Yes,
old
that's
Ricardo
true.
Ramirez doing his naughty business.
What a scamp. Yes, and it has that whole backdrop of, as you say, the Night Stalker killings of the moral majority panic. It opens with this astonishing montage over the credits of, I feel like Ty West just went to Eclipse Library and typed in the words 80s dipshits and just got this out of it.
It definitely sets the tone, doesn't it?
It's a montage of satanic panic, of media sensationalism. I don't think there was any D&D panic in there, which is a shame because D&D panic is one of the stupidest bits of the 80s.
It is. It did have big old Ronnie Reagan, didn't it?
It did, yes. It's
You know,
that
the
kind of
actor.
film. Yeah, yeah. Did he get a Screen Actors Guild minimum for this? I wonder, because he's not in it very much.
Yeah, I don't know. They might have like crumpled up a dollar, tossed it on his grave or something.
Nicer than what I would throw on his grave. But yeah, it's very much trying to sort of set itself in a social history of LA and the entertainment industry in particular in the 80s. And when it gets into Hollywood, there is some fun to be had in, spot the explicit and implicit reference, isn't there?
Indeed, yeah. There's a lot going on.
They end up at one point at the house from Psycho, except since this is like the mid-80s, it has to be specified as the house from Psycho 2, which is quite funny.
That is, I'm surprised that like more of the film didn't take place there.
Yeah, because it has this huge kind of Hollywood backlot set, which Elizabeth Debicki is driving around in her fun little golf buggy. And there is a set piece at the Psycho house, and it's in that context, it's almost a kind of perversely reassuring place, isn't it? Because Maxine is hiding out in there from from being blown away by the movie's most unbelievably hammy performance, which is Kevin Bacon.
I don't understand why Kevin Bacon like couldn't get to her by just chewing his way through all the scenery. just walk up, take a big old bite out the Psycho 2 house.
Maybe it's a listed building. Yeah. Yeah, I think Kevin Bacon's EE adverts had more of a sense of grounded, nuanced reality in than this, which people have said that the character is inspired by Jake Jeets in Chinatown, in as much as he is wearing a white suit and he has some plasters on his face. But I think it's much more likely that the character was inspired when Kevin Bacon watched Knives Out and thought, yeah, he calls that a hammy Southern detective. I say I shall give him a hammy Southern detective.
I mean, I think it was nice of him because otherwise we'd all be talking about how bad Lily Collins' Yorkshire accent is. But
Isn't it amazing?
by comparison,
yeah, can we? Part of me feels bad doing it because she is just in one scene, but I was sat there trying to think, where's she meant to be from? I'm getting part of it's just a cut glass English accent, part of it's kind of Irish, a bit
yeah, it's
Geordie.
so weird because I feel she's just in the scene and she's talking and she's like, "Oh yes, it was very hard for me growing up working down mine." what, Lily? What's going on? What's happening with your voice?
I guarantee you that scene originally did not have the line about a council estate in North Yorkshire in it. I guarantee you that was added when they got on set and all of the crew were like, Ty, where the fuck is she from?
Just desperately spinning a globe trying to find any country that has that accent.
Triangulating the spot in the middle of all of the accents that she is attempting. She's British as well, too, isn't she? She doesn't. It's not like there's a situation where it's like Anne Hathaway in One Day, where she might never have heard a Yorkshire accent before she signed up to that film. This is someone who should absolutely know what a Yorkshire accent sounds like.
Yeah, and even because we do need to stress, it's not even that it's just like a bad Yorkshire accent. It's just something insane.
It's just unrecognisable as a Yorkshire accent. Yeah, it's very odd. I think this is like the spur to go through the cast because X has a good cast. Pearl is kind of the Mia Goth show, which I'm very happy with, and is also explained by the circumstances of its production, even if
Yeah,
it is.
that film literally has like 4 people in it.
Yeah, and at the
And one
time I
of those is a
watched it.
scarecrow.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it has about sort of 4 actors in, and at the time I watched it, I didn't know who any of them is. I think it's going to be very funny rewatching it and knowing that the pervy cinema projectionist is actually Kal-El, the last son of Krypton, next time. But
Yeah,
it's
because I think I'd watched it when he'd like just been announced as Superman. I was like,
right.
oh, I mean, I can see it in his face, if not his performance.
Yeah, yes. I think while we're on it, and since we won't get a chance to talk about Pearl, I think that's a great performance because he has to play both someone who we recognise as a sleazebag and someone who is also believably clean cut and or shucks enough for someone like Pearl to be interested in, which is an impossible balancing act, but he does it.
Yeah, you get like, oh, I see why she likes him, but I, as like more of a cynic, get that, oh no, he's bad news bears.
Yes, definitely.
And mostly it's just that he's got a twiddly little mustache.
He does. I'd forgotten that. Yes, yeah. Do you think there'll ever be a time when we can go back to those blissful Magnum PI days when Hollywood heroes can have tashes?
Oh, can you imagine how bloody livid Henry Cavill would be if one day there's a Superman film where Superman has a mustache? After all he went through. With his CGI Play-Doh lips.
What a memory. Yeah. But yeah, we've mentioned Mia Goth is extraordinary, by the way. We should start off by saying this has
Oh, she
been
is such an incredible talent.
absolutely her franchise. She has devoured every single role, and this is no exception.
Yeah, I mean, even just that opening scene where she gives like the monologue performance,
Yeah.
and just the way that the dialogue itself is so obviously like hokey and cheesy,
Yes.
but she
Yes.
just absolutely sells it.
Yeah.
And then storms out the audition, turns to everyone else, and just says, "You better go home because I fucking nailed that."
And you could tell that Ty West is now writing for her now because I don't think you would give just any performer a series of gear shifts like that in scene 1. Like, it's not even imagine if they couldn't do it. Imagine if they weren't actively great at it.
Yeah, this is definitely like a. I've worked with Mia Goth a lot now. I know what she's good at. Let's put some more of that in the film.
Absolutely, yeah. But we have mentioned Kevin Bacon and Lily Collins for what it's worth. There's also quite a big role in here for Elizabeth Debicki, who we've mentioned, and who, I mean, my only objection here is that I don't think there has ever been a British person whose surname is Bender.
I mean, to be fair, maybe that's why she had to leave England to come to Hollywood.
She's really interesting because I think Debicki firstly gets exactly what the character is and goes for this very camp sort of ice queen. But she's also, I feel like if anyone else was making a film about horror filmmaking in the 1980s, if anyone else was writing a film that was set on like the set of a sequel, not even the original, a sequel to a low-end satanic horror movie in '85, they would not write a director like this, I think.
No, it would definitely be more of like a sleazy, neckbeardy.
Yes.
But what if we have like more breasts in this scene?
You'd write the trauma guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. You would make him a trauma guy.
Yeah, yeah. Elizabeth Debicki reminded me that there were a lot of people. There are mentions of Lizzie Borden in this, and I'm never quite sure whether they're meaning like a film about the murderer Lizzie Borden or a film by the director Lizzie Borden, but she's very much in the mold of Lizzie Borden, in one of those very artsy kind of underground transgressive directors who was looking for a place where you could actually get money, and it turned out exploitation films was that place. She's very high-minded. She's got a fabulous sort of power dressing style that I think is
She's
slightly
such
ahead
big
of its
boots.
time. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's perfectly 80s. I think there is a sequel to be made where Elizabeth Bender watches Bill Clinton get elected the first time, and as soon as Hillary walks on stage, she's just like, "See, I've been telling you it's a look that works."
I guess it also works because, like, say, the whole point of that character is she's very, like, wants to be ahead of that whole curve.
Yes.
Like, she is, I guess she is, like, the prototype to the elevated horror director.
Yeah, she is.
Like,
Yeah.
she definitely has an interview where she says she doesn't make horror films, she makes Elizabeth Bender films.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny because, I'd forgotten until the studio logo came up at the start that this whole trilogy's been distributed by A24. I feel like when people say A24 horror, they are not referring to stuff like this.
No, they're talking about the ass turds.
I have to say, there are a lot of those films that get dismissed as elevated horror that I really love and will go to the wall for. I'm a big Robert Eggers fan. I think Luca
Oh yeah, no, don't
Guadagnino's Suspiria remake is
love
good.
the Eggman, like love the Lighthouse, like love the Norseman. Very excited for Nosferatu.
Have you got nicknames for every new Hollywood director?
Probably, and if not, I'll make one up.
Yeah, we'll go for it. But yeah, it's very funny hearing Elizabeth Bender come out with all of this stuff about how her film is going to rip the mask off the 50s, largely because you suspect it's Ty West self-parodying to some extent. This is a film that is, to some extent, trying to rip the mask off the 1980s, and I noticed, and I hate to bring this up because it's still a raw, painful memory, but this film is executive produced by Sam Levinson, creator of The Idol, which I recently put myself through.
Oh, is that the TV show that came out that everyone loved and it was really great?
That's the one.
Starring hit actor
yeah.
The Weeknd.
I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but television's so much more interesting than films these days. It's where all the really great storytelling is. And I certainly remembered that as I slogged through 4.5 hours of The Weeknd's wank fantasies. But The Idol, the reason why I mentioned it is because The Idol has loads of that kind of dialogue where it's like, people think this about art, but they should be thinking this, and it's very obviously Sam Levinson sort of nudging you and saying, "This is what I'm doing. Look at me. This is the reaction you should be having right now." And I think with Elizabeth Bender, West is just taking the piss out of himself, really, and it's much more enjoyable that way.
I think it also works like with the narrative of the film as well.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot kind of in the background suggesting that, because Maxine's whole thing is, no, I want to be the biggest star.
Yeah.
But there's that question of, but really, when you're an adult film actress who is starring in The Puritan 2, is this maybe as good as it gets?
Yeah, and in a strange way, you sort of put it out of your head. I mean, there were some porn stars who crossed over to legit Hollywood in the 70s and 80s. There is a mention, at least one mention, of Madeline Chambers, who was in David Cronenberg's second commercially released film, Rabid. But it also sort of doesn't matter. The golden chain between Maxine and Pearl is that their dreams of stardom are pretty delusional.
Very much. It's It definitely ends up with Maxine having a similar, but I'm a star breakdown.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Although possibly with more like heavy firearms.
Yeah, yeah. More heavy firearms and still somehow less painful than that smile at the end of Pearl.
Oh, it's just so uncomfortable.
I
It
was
goes on
thinking
for so long.
it does, and she starts crying during it, and it's just an agonizing rictus. I was thinking about it a lot when I watched Liz Truss lose her seat.
But it really is the same smile.
It is. She too is still a star.
Oh, Liz, no, you aren't.
But yeah, I think you sort of, with Maxine, you sort of suspend it for the duration of the film because she's so much fun to watch, and you do kind of care for her, even though in this one she's a harsher character. You know, she's been through some shit, and I don't want to say this is a horror movie about what Jamie Lee Curtis inexplicably calls trauma, but it sort of is.
It is, yeah. They're bringing it all back to the whole art house elevated horror. The real villain
Yes,
is trauma.
it really is. And it's funny because Ty West, when he was asked sort of what relationship the films in this franchise have with each other, he said they do add to each other if you watch them all, but you can also watch them independently just as horror movies. And I think that's probably true. But I would like to know from someone who's watched Maxine but hasn't watched the others, like, did it strike you as a horror movie with an unusual lead character? Because I think part of what makes Maxine's behaviour understandable in the film that has a name is that we've seen the shit she's been through, and we can cut her a bit of extra slack when she's like callous or uncaring.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I agree with Ty West because I feel like the whole point is at the end of X, Maxine running over Pearl with the car is kind of like the big switch for her where she becomes this harsher character, and then Maxine is carrying on from that. So I'm
Definitely.
not sure it makes as much sense as a standalone horror film.
No, I definitely think someone who watched this would be a bit perplexed as to why your final girl isn't as vulnerable as final girls tend to be. I mean, the first big gore set piece we have is it's her bringing the gore. You know, it's not the killer.
Yeah.
It's her stamping on Buster Keaton's scrotum, and I didn't think I'd have to say that sentence again.
Oh, it's so violent, Graham. It's the fact that it's one of those scenes that you think is going to cut away at a point and then just doesn't cut away.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And yeah, it's also preceded. Why is it she says stuff like "drop the knife, Buster," which is a police squad gag? You know, it's an airplane gag. It's such a silly moment.
It is, but it does do a good job of just like disarming you until the big stomp.
The big stomp, yeah, until the plums come out of the bag. Yes, yeah. I think one of the things that I think is interesting about this film, and I think it buries its deep thoughts very well. It's, as we say, it's not elevated horror, but I think it is the product of some thought about, you know, what happens to a final girl after she's been through all that. And there's lots of things that could happen to her. That, you know, she could become more sensitive, more compassionate, more determined to help the underprivileged. But this is Reagan's America. So she actually ends up deciding that if I can get away from a load of murderous psychopaths, anyone can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and wrap them around a killer's throat.
Indeed, and I like the idea that, and that's exactly the attitude you need to get ahead in Hollywood.
That as well, yeah, it's a double action piece of social commentary. Yeah. Because that comes out the most when she's seen with Michelle Monaghan and Bobby Cannavale as the two detectives who are trying to solve a lot of killings that are like suspected to be the Night Stalker, but are in fact the work of a fictional killer here. I felt they were slightly shortchanged. I mean, I think they're both great actors. I can't understand why Michelle Monaghan doesn't headline things in particular. I had a lot of fun every time they were on screen, and I think that if Ty West is still looking at the sort of petri dish approach for this franchise, where you just look at what worked in the last one and develop it, I could go for a Detective William and Torres prequel where they're just investigating mad satanic crimes in LA.
The only thing I will say is I completely forgot it was Michelle Monaghan and not Carla Gugino.
It happens. Yeah. I had a similar mix-up where, I mean, Bobby Cannavale has a particular look in this, and when he first got out the car, I thought, oh no, is it Eli Roth? But then he started acting, so I thought, oh, it can't be him.
Like, didn't just immediately open his mouth and a spew of problematic things just burst out.
He didn't do the dialogue equivalent of turning to the camera and going, that's right, it's me, Eli Roth. Yes. But they're both great, I think.
They are both actors who I'm just happy to see like in anything.
Monaghan I just can't figure out because it seemed like she had a pretty guaranteed role in the Mission Impossible franchise. And then in the one after she was introduced, her role is girl who waves at Tom Cruise in the final scene. I think, oh, for God's sake, she's great. Give her more stuff.
Yeah, it is the problem of when you get a great actor in and then realize, oh wait, I don't actually know what to do with this character.
Definitely, yeah. And you would think with the amount of stuff the Mission Impossible films crib from Bond, they would know that giving your super spy action hero a wife is like, it's a corner you're going to have to back out of somehow.
Yeah, we can't have a film that would dare suggest that maybe Tom Cruise should stop like jumping off buildings and hanging off the side of helicopters and just settle down a bit.
It would be a sort of the equivalent of having a film that said maybe Maxine Minx should set her sights low, just probably do some convention appearances, stuff like that.
Yeah, Maxine Minx goes to Korea's advice.
But like we say, absurdly stacked cast. I could have gone for more Giancarlo Esposito, but it definitely gets what is Giancarlo Espositus about him.
It is. It's nice to see that he's not just been cast as like stoic Gustavo Fring, but in the 1980s. Because I think he definitely did have a period where that was basically like the one role he got, and now he's allowed to actually act in things.
He's not even a baddie in this. I mean, he's not someone you cross, but he's not a baddie.
Yeah, he's a very good agent.
Yeah. But all of this brings us, I think, onto the two performances which explain why this is on an episode of Pop Screen rather than us lobbying Rob for a Ty West episode of Uncut Network, which is Moses Sumney and Halsey as Maxine's two friends.
Indeed, they are two people who are in this film.
What do you know about Moses Sumney and Halsey, Andrew?
Moses Sumney, I'll admit I'm unfamiliar with. Halsey, though, I'm a big Halsey fan for, well, it's 11:34 now, so for over 24 hours now.
I had the same journey. I had not paid Halsey much attention, but I thought, oh, right, well, we're doing a Pop Screen episode, better do my homework, and I listened to If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, and thought, yeah, this fucking slaps. This is such a good album.
Yeah, I decided to go for like more of the cross section of just find the inevitable "This Is Halsey" Spotify playlist and just start going through it.
Yes.
Because I feel like initially I was a little bit like, oh yeah, this is pretty okay. Because I think a lot of her stuff, I mean, it feels unfair to say it sounds a lot like a lot of things at the moment, but I feel like a lot of things have taken like things that she's done, and that's sort of become one of the sounds of the 2020s.
Yes.
But just
yeah.
got a lot of the stuff she's done. Badlands is such an album.
Yeah. She was kind of down on that afterwards. She was like, "Oh, it didn't really have a hit single." And you think, well, I don't think that's the be all and end all. As you say, it's clearly had its influence despite not having that one song that everyone knows.
Yeah, definitely. She has birthed the genre of music that I would describe as the Spider-Verse soundtrack. Because that's the only way I know how to talk about it.
But the second album, like I say, I really enjoy. I was listening to it on YouTube, and there was a very funny comment, which is like, because that album is produced by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who, I mean, let's just skip past that. Obviously, if you're a pop star looking for big pop producers, the guys behind Nine Inch Nails are the first people you go to, right?
Wait, Graham, are you trying to say that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, the film composers, also have a band?
Yes, they do.
Wow.
There probably are people who only know those guys from their film soundtracks, which is very, very
Oh,
funny.
I know. That's why it's funny.
It's not like the days when the FBI were investigating them under suspicion of making snuff porn, which is a thing that happens.
I mean, that feels like it could be the plot to the next, like, Maxine film.
Totally. Yeah. I think the only thing sort of stopping them from just lifting the story directly is that it was so dumb. They were filming like a low budget music video early on in the Nine Inch Nails days. They wanted a crane shot of like Trent Reznor's corpse lying splayed on the floor, but they didn't have a crane. So they just tied it to a load of helium balloons, not dissimilar to the opening of the Pixar film Up, and just let it drift away. And then they lost it, and some farmer found it and was like, "Oh my God, the Mexican cartels have made this."
That's amazing. Oh, I think my favorite is what did they expect to happen? Like, how did they not think through? Oh yeah, we'll just attach this camera to all these balloons. Oh wait, we have to get the camera back.
Maybe they expected it would land in a whimsical part of Patagonia with giant birds and talking dogs.
That's right. They're just sat there with Tug the dog, just looking at their watches, going, "Any moment now."
But yeah, I was listening to this album that they produced for her, and there was a comment beneath it that was like, no, completely ordinary, average sound. Is it just, them doing How to Destroy Angels, but with a female vocalist? And I was like, well, there really is a pincer movement of how you can look at this. Like, I think if you're a Reznor and Ross fan, you could listen to it and say, they're not doing anything new. But I also think if you're trying to say that an album by a big pop star is boring, comparing it to How to Destroy Angels is not making the case.
Yeah, it also just seems weird to call Halsey like pop. I feel like it's that weird. It's sort of. I mean, I guess gets into big questions like what is pop?
I'm glad you're wondering about this because a lot of music coverage leaves me kind of scratching my head over this. It's like, it feels like up until about the 90s, maybe the 2000s, pop just meant that which is in the charts, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally just popular music.
Yeah. And if it wasn't like a band who were obviously part of a different genre, Iron Maiden had some hits, but they were never a pop band. But otherwise, it's like 50s pop doesn't sound like 80s pop, but they are both pop. And now we're in this weird situation where unless it has like layers of pulsing synths and programmed drums, people won't call it pop. Like there was a situation where that Charlie XCX album came out and all the critics were like, pop music's back. And I thought, for this to be the case, I would have to believe that Taylor Swift is something other than a pop star. And what else is she?
Yeah, I feel like the problem is you got to like sort of the late noughties, early 2010s, and you had a lot of like very heavily managed pop groups, like One Direction or something,
Yeah,
where it's very much they are the results of a manager or a producer saying, right, there is a specific sound that is popular, so everything we do will be this sound because this is what sells. But now that seems to have died a death more, and you get more like singer songwriters doing their own thing.
yeah.
It's kind of hard to tell like where one line ends and the next begins.
That's true. Yeah, it's sort of like Billie Eilish is clearly a pop star in that she is very famous and makes pop records, but she never gets mentioned in like these roundups of what state pop is at now. I don't know. I find it. I think it's probably is a bit of what you said that what is pop is now led by people who actually listen to pop music, and some people find that intolerable. It's like, what do the kids know about pop music?
Yeah. Or maybe the answer is literally the only pop star left is Carly Rae Jepsen. That's it.
That's
She's
also
all the pop and nothing else is pop.
there's no pop left for anyone else once Carly Rae Jepsen drops an album. Maybe that is true.
Exactly. It's just she needs it all. She's too powerful.
But yeah, I think yeah, we both like Halsey. We are both fond of Halsey. I like Halsey in this film too. I think she has a very fun kind of campy New York broad accent, which plays off, you know, Mia Goth isn't giving a sort of Mike Lee performance in this, but she is by necessity more nuanced than anyone else around her. And I think Halsey gets the level of stereotype right for what works alongside that.
Yeah. I think she also works quite well as kind of this is maybe what Maxine would have been if she hadn't gone through the events of X.
Yes, yeah, because she's also a porn star and she's less concerned with breaking out. She just sort of lives day to day, and yeah, you can definitely see that Maxine at the start of X is a bit closer to that than what she's become here.
Yeah, just it's maybe my big break will happen at some point, but who knows?
Yeah, for the time being, I just want to make my rent. Sumney, I've had a live set by Moses Sumney in my sort of watch later queue for ages, largely because it was Moses Sumney live from Planet Afropunk, and I thought, wow, that is a strong satellite signal they've got from Planet Afropunk to here.
I mean, I wonder how do you even do Afro? Is it like, oh, maybe it's like a cool Afro mohawk?
Oh yeah, like it's quite a thick mohawk. It's still curly. You can appreciate that. That's definitely it. That's almost certainly what he was thinking of, and definitely not what two clueless white guys thought when they heard the phrase.
I mean, yep, who better to pass judgment than us?
Exactly, yes. I was trying to work out because he released a new single this morning, which will be an old single by the time this goes out, and I heard it and liked it and thought, I wonder why I haven't given him much thought previously because he's been on my radar, and then I realised that this is not his acting debut; it is his film debut. His acting debut was on HBO's smash hit The Idol.
Oh no!
Which I will say, Our episode on The Idol bears this out. There are two performances in The Idol that are good. Davine Joy Randolph and Rachel Sennett. But there is a tier beneath them of people where it is not their fault. And what the problems with The Idol are not down to Moses Sumney.
Oh, is it one of those? There is only so much you can do with the dialogue you're given.
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know if there's a part that he's playing. I think after Sam Levinson and The Weeknd got rid of the original showrunner for being a Nicky girl, they were just left with a load of actors where they didn't actually have anything thought out for them, and he is unfortunately one of them. Couldn't be said of this film, where he's got a pretty hefty part and he is good in it.
Indeed, yeah, he is the. I mean, I don't think they ever say it explicitly, but I assume the character he's playing is gay.
There is a line where he suggests Maxine's only friends with him because he's the only guy who isn't trying to sleep with her. And yeah, I think that's definitely the implication.
Yeah, but yeah, he's fun. He's like the video store. And I'm quite surprised he got killed off partway through.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that differentiates this from its inspirations, because of course there is part of you that thinks I'm watching a new slasher film, it's set in the 80s. Unlike Pearl, they did make slasher films in the 80s, so why should I not just watch one of those instead of this? And I think one of the big things that differentiates it is that all of the women here die off screen, and the men, they really don't.
No, they do not. He gets stabbed so much. Stabbed and cut and slashed and hacked.
Absolutely brutalized by the film's black-gloved, black-clad killer, who, I don't want to say this because this is a more recent film than we normally cover, so I'm not as confident going into spoiler territory as I am with something like What a Whopper.
I mean, I guess, to be fair, it's going to have been out for quite a few months by the time the episode goes out.
It may well be on home release, but I'll tread around it and I'll just say I am not the kind of guy who, guesses the twist. I actively don't try to guess the twist. I don't enjoy guessing the twist. I guess the twist.
Yeah, I think given the way the film starts, it's quite hard not to guess the twist.
Had it not done that, I might have forgotten that was a plot beat at the end of X, which is, after all, 2 movies ago. But as you say, it starts by reminding you of it, which is...
Yeah, but I guess the problem is if it doesn't remind you of it, then the twist kind of comes out of nowhere and doesn't seem to make that much sense.
Perhaps it's been sacrificed on the altar of getting these things to work as standalone films. I still think it's fun. Like I say, the guessability or otherwise of a twist is not something that usually concerns me. I think if you have an obvious twist and you then make me think, oh, I'm glad they went for that obvious twist because it was so much more fun than anything else. I think this just about manages it on those terms.
It does. I will say, though, I think part of that is why, because I like Maxine, I don't think I like it as much as X and Pearl. And I feel like a lot of it is just because it doesn't quite have that, like, same sort of big twist or just sense of, ooh, this is interesting. It's kind of like what you say. This feels like just an 80s slasher, but like with a few extra bits added on. And it's like, it's a good 80s slasher. It just doesn't feel like it's doing as much fresh stuff as X and Pearl did.
I'll go with that. Yeah, I think in a strange way, these movies, apart from Pearl, which just I think we both agree has a completely insane frame of reference that makes it kind of, I guess you could watch it and think, well, this is no magnificent obsession by Douglas Sirk, and it's like, Yeah, no shit. Nobody fucks a scarecrow in that.
Yeah.
But I think in a strange way, these movies work better when you're less fussed about the inspiration. Like, I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre might be the most perfect horror film ever made. I think a lot of those sort of regional southern horrors of the 70s are really interesting and hold up really well. And maybe that's part of the reason why I wasn't as wild on X as everyone else. But with the 80s slashers, I mostly find them boring. So I think doing them with a bit of hindsight, with a bit more ability to say, okay, in retrospect, this is what the 80s were about, is more interesting to me than actually just watching a Friday the 13th sequel.
Yeah, I guess the problem for me is just I feel like going back to the 80s is a thing that's been done quite a lot in more recent Hollywood. I mean, heck, it was only like a couple of months ago that Late Night with the Devil came out, and that does quite a similar sort of satanic-y, panicky-esque thing.
It's very true. Yeah, I think it's going to be unavoidable because you have a generation of people now who are very sort of set up and established as horror directors who can remember growing up when the supposedly grown-up serious television was telling you that Judas Priest were putting backwards messages in their albums to get you to kill yourself. It's hard not to mind that stuff when you're a horror director, I think.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous and juicy.
Yes, yeah. And I think there's something fun, as someone who has been subscribed to 14 times for over 25 years now, will say that there's something fun about defining an either by its stupid paranoias. I am a child of the, is this film a real alien autopsy either? There is something so rich and dumb about the 90s for me because of that.
God, can you imagine the films we're going to get in 20 years about now?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine that because you think, well, all of our weird panics now are pretty legit. Like, unless they're going to make films about what if QAnon was real,
Yeah,
please
that's what I
don't.
mean. What if Chuck E. Cheese was actually like some devil worshipping child murder cult?
What if pop stars actually were part of the Illuminati because they put their eye in a little circle on the album cover? What if that was true, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. Because they're the agents who are hiding the fact that this is all going on in their secret bases on the underside of the flat Earth. And if you want to hear more about this, my new book, This Is All Definitely Not Bullshit, please buy this book, will be available soon.
Normally, at the end of a show, I ask people, where, just to remind the audience where they can find you, but you just have.
Exactly. They just, go to your friendly local QAnon and I'll be there.
Yes, go to the grotty internet fascist message board where, for some reason, someone with top-level US government security is telling you all the shit that's going to go down in the future. And that's where you'll find Andrew.
Just as a disclaimer, that's not where you find me. Don't go to QAnon.
But yes, that's I think it's so it's probably a fool's errand to predict this because I change my mind all the time, but this is likely to be the opening salvo of our Halloween month. It is quite likely that we will have a whole month of horror treats to excite you after this.
Or maybe this is all a trick. See, because the treats and the tricks and the...
You've had the treat of this episode.
I can do Halloween references in July.
But yes, you'll get 3 free episodes in October because it is one of those months with 5 Thursdays. But if you want even more than that, you can subscribe to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, where I think by this time I'll be coming towards the end of my grand experiment to see if you can watch just the mythology episodes of the X-Files and have it make sense.
I suspect the answer is no. Sorry to spoil it for you.
At the moment, it's going well. I'm towards the end of Series 8. I think that there's very little chance that it's going to dive off a cliff after this, right? Right?
That bit in the latest Lindsay Ellis video where it flashes to just a shot of the word foreshadowing.
Yes. But yes, yeah, you can find that there. You can also find Alex's Red Dwarf reviews, 2 whole podcasts where you can't get them anywhere else. There's Last Night, where we just talk about the things we've enjoyed this month. There is From the Video Aisle, where Rob looks at cult classic franchises from days gone by and loads of other stuff. It's a very good and very cost-effective Patreon. £3 a month for everything, and there are £1 and £2 tiers. We'll be out on that feed with a Patreon exclusive episode the day after this drops. But until a fortnight's time, when we'll be back on your free feed, I've been Graham.
And I've been Andrew.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.